Hey, we're back and we even have sound. Alrighty, well, hopefully this will last for a little longer than last time. So, do we have any questions? So, just as a reminder, and anybody can hop in with questions if there's something we want to go over more. The exam is going to be on everything since we got back. So that's 4.1, which is a linear approximation. 4.2, and I'm just going to flip through here real quick because the next few sections are all kind of together. So, extreme values, (4.3), monotonicity, and the mean value theorem. 4.4, the shape of the graph. And so this is all sort of one chunk, like critical points, inflection points, increasing, decreasing, concave up and down, and then of course the mean value theorem. That's where most of that stuff sort of comes from. 4.5 was L'Hopital's rule. And that's pretty much what there was to that section. We skipped 4.6, so none of that. 4.7 was applied optimization. So it's that stuff with word problems, basically. And specifically, it's critical points. Basically those extreme values that we talked about before, but doing it with word problems. And then lastly, we had Newton's method, which, like L'Hopital's rule, is just all the section was about. Alright, so L'Hopital's rule is a rule that helps us deal with limits. Newton's method is a method that helps us approximate zeros. And other things, as long as we can write it as the zero of some function. And yeah, linear approximation is, well, an approximation. They picked pretty good words to describe these things, which is good, because they've had, a long time to pick those words. But it's a way to approximate the function using a straight line. So there's a formula there to use. Often, right, what we're approximating is delta F. So just to sort of write down things we had here. Alright, so L'Hopital is specifically for finding limits when we have certain indeterminate forms, and we can make a lot of different indeterminate forms look like those certain indeterminate forms. So that's sort of the basic topics that we have on this section. Again, these three here are sort of combined. Right, a problem that asks for one of those is likely going to ask for most of those, except for extreme value, which will come up again in implied optimization. So there's going to be 12 questions on the exam. It's not timed or anything. You can take as long as you want. You're going to have a week on it. Remember, the rules are the only other person you can talk to about it is me. Right? You can use your book. You can use your notes. But no other people. This is supposed to be your work. I can still answer questions. But that's it. I'm going to be posting the exam later today. And we will go ahead and have one of these sessions on Monday in case you have any other questions. That's half the way you find critical points. Right, so also possibly the derivative doesn't exist. Right, and that's generally going to mean that there's a fraction and the denominator is 0. So inflection points are this same idea. Right, so I'm going to emphasize it by copying it down. Except, whoops, we're looking at the second derivative. So inflection points are, you start off like you're finding a critical point, except you're dealing with the second derivative. And in addition, the sign of the second derivative specifically changes, right? Not just from negative to positive, it could also go from positive to negative. So that's the crit points and inflection points. When you're talking about increasing or decreasing, there's no such thing as an end point. That's for when you're talking about extrema. So if you're doing increasing or decreasing, then you're going to draw a line and you're going to put your crit points on it. And then you're going to choose points in between, right? So this is the plugging points in between. right? And you're either going to do plus or minus. And those should all be primes for the increasing and decreasing. Concave up and concave down is the exact same process, except for you're doing it with the second derivative. Right, except it's not quite as convenient. We can't just say inflection points, but all those potential inflection points that we found from above, right, that is places where the first derivative is 0 or doesn't exist. Right, and we're not plugging in the critical points necessarily. We're plugging things in between like we were before, right? So if this was -1 and this was 2, right? Again, we could plug in 0. Right here we could plug in -5. Maybe that's easy for some reason. Right, and here we could plug in critical points if we want. Right, nothing's stopping us from plugging in critical points, but critical points aren't necessarily going to get us what we want. We also want in-between points. Just like we wanted for increasing and decreasing. And again, I'm going to have to look it up because I never remember which is positive and which is negative. Positive means up. So if we got a positive number here, it's concave up. If we get a negative number there, it's concave down. All right, so we always find these guys by taking either the first or second derivative and setting it equal to 0 and figuring out where it doesn't exist. Right? If it was the first derivative, then those are always crit points. That's just the definition of crit point. If it's the second derivative, then these pieces are only going to be inflection points if it went from negative to positive or positive to negative. And then concave up and concave down, we plug in anything between these points, right? Anything at all in both cases, and figure out whether it's positive or negative. Does that make sense? Any questions about what we got there? Excellent. Any other questions about anything at all? Just zooming it back to the general topic list. Also, if you have any questions about, not necessarily directly related to the exam, about how, I don't know, things might wrap up, or other assignments that are going on, or anything along those lines, we can also talk about that. Yes, they are, they count as homework assignments. They will be averaged in with the rest of the homework assignments. Right, there's supposed to be some bonus points for knowing the stuff that you're supposed to know to be in the class. And as I should have done, because it's going to be on the video and everything, that's asking about the placement exams. They are going to count towards the final grade. In case someone watches this later. So remember, after I post this, as you're going through, remember, I need to be able to read it. So that's a question of handwriting and how you scan it / take a picture. Be careful with ambient light and your flash. If you're taking a picture, that can make a glare that makes it pretty impossible to read off of white paper. Do try and make it so that when you take the picture, up is up. There are actually things I can do to work around that, but it's much more convenient if I don't have to do some weird fiddling before I can hop right into grading. Do remember to try to have your answers be orderly. It's not quite as possible for me to lose track of pages when they're all posted as files online. But it is still possible for me to lose track of problems. So if problem 4 doesn't come after problem 3 on your paper, then, and I have to go digging through multiple files, then I might miss it somewhere. So do try to have them be orderly, as neat handwriting as you can manage. Check over your picture and make sure there's no big glare going on. This is going to be due in a week. I have it due at noon. That's not a hard stop time. If you get it done at like 2, or you get your pictures taken at like 2, don't freak out, but do try to get it there at noon. The reason I have the due date set at noon is so that there is possibly that little bit of wiggle room, right? Not so that everyone takes advantage of it. But try to get it in by noon. Don't freak out if you're a little bit late. I'm not going to cut off your final exam because you're an hour or 2 late. But have noon be a solid time that you are aiming for. And have anything after that be some sort of last minute emergency thing. I've already talked about what counts as cheating. That is anything but your book and notes, or me. You can always ask me questions. I can't really think of anything else. I'm gonna show up and start up a Twitch stream at the usual time on Monday. And it's again gonna be review, so whatever questions y'all have, yeah, I don't know anything else. So I guess I'm gonna go ahead and log off. If y'all have any questions, again, anytime, you can send them along. If it's during office hours, I'll respond quicker than otherwise. But I'll see y'all Monday, and the exam will be going up on Canvas shortly.